Good afternoon. Third session in 3 after lunch, so we're going to try and liven it up and keep you all awake and engaged. For those who don't know you, my name is Pat Young, and this session is called PSB and Beyond. Now, given the demands of existing audiences and the need to innovate to satisfy the needs of new audiences and platforms, over the next 40 to 45 minutes, we're going to be discussing the sustainability of the current public service broadcasting models. I'm joined by James Purnell, Head of Strategy and Education at the BBC, Jay Hunt, Chief Creative Officer at Channel 4, Monica Maggioni, President of the Italian public broadcaster RAI, and Peter Rosberg, Head of Planning and Acquisitions at DR, the Danish Broadcasting Corporation. But before we get going, I just want to share some facts with you from Ender's analysis. So first you can see that license fee income relatively flat over the period. You can see that advertising revenue has seen a slight growth, and the real growth has been subscription revenues over the period 2010 to 2015, which have grown over 24%. If we go on to the next slide, what we can see is the BBC's income has declined since 2010 in real terms. Channel 4's revenue broadly flat, although it's ticked up in the last 2 years, and ITV's revenue steadily growing over the period. Now, if we go to the last slide, if you look at this end column here, that is the UK. 45% of UK TV revenue coming from subscription, 28% from advertising, and 27% from public funds and the license fee. Now, if you look at RAI, about half the size of our market, maybe about 45% of the size of our market, subscription at 37%, advertising the dominant or the largest factor at 42%, and then the license fee accounting for 21%. And then if we go across to Denmark and DR, now you have to take into account that that is a tenth of the size of the UK market. That's a £1.4 billion market compared to our £14 billion market. Over half the revenues in DR from subscription, mainly cable, 18% from advertising, and 30% from public funds. So in all the European models, public funding is significant. In Germany, very significant. In America, public funding being at 0. But as you can see, different balances between subscription, license fee, and advertising. RAI, for example, has a mixed model of license fee and advertising. DR and the BBC have a license fee, Channel 4 advertising only. How might these models change over time, given all of the pressures and the tensions that we've heard about earlier? Time is going to be tight, but I am going to leave time for questions from the floor. But I'm going to start with Jay first. The discussion about Channel 4 privatisation continues, and everybody that's cited seems to want to insist that they need to be a producer broadcaster, not a publisher broadcaster. So can your model survive without owning IP?
Yeah, I mean, largely because it never had IP. So obviously Channel 4 was set up, and part of the trigger for that was to support the independent sector, which I think it's done incredibly effectively. So it's a bit of a sort of odd question in a sense. We haven't had access to IP rights. We still don't have it. And as you say, I'm unique on this panel in being the only public service broadcaster that doesn't take a penny of public money. So the model at Channel 4 is very clear. We need big commercial shows to drive our cross-subsidy, to fund the shows that are loss-leading, that deliver very purely to our remit. But, you know, I think we've had lots of endorsement recently about the sustainability of the model, and I feel very confident about where we are now creatively and in terms of revenue, actually.
But given the big companies, Discovery and others, are buying up all of your independent producers, given even Netflix is now gone into the studio business, can you be so sure that you can survive without owning IP? Isn't the growth fund even the first step into
Well, in a very small way, Pat. I mean, I think
ownership?
in the end, Channel 4 has been brilliant at innovating in terms of its income over many years. It was very quick in the digital market with the launch of the digital channels. It was first to market with all 4, which remains extraordinarily compelling. And a lot of the rest of the activity over the past few years has been around, you know, directing our effort away from spot advertising, making sure that we have footholds in other sources of revenue, whether it's the data strategy on all 4 or the growth fund or the commercial fund. So there's no massive play in IP. There's a realization that we need to continue very simply to make compelling programming that advertisers want to be part of. And I think when I look at how we're doing, particularly around delivery of Younge, which is a potent area, and people have talked about it earlier, Channel 4 is in a very good place. And, you know, obviously we can't entirely predict what's happening in a quickly moving market, but I think we feel we're in a very strong position.
Monica, I'm going to come to you now. Situation at RAI. Although people here be very familiar with the BBC and ITV, perhaps you can spend a couple of minutes telling us the situation at RAI and the challenges you face.
But you know, RAI is evolving these years and in these months because in last December, a new law has been approved and it changed a little bit our governance, and it was a change that tended to reduce a little bit the board from 9 to 7 members and to give a little more power to the CEO to be active and quick in taking decisions. Problem is that this law didn't go deep inside the structure of RAI and how RAI works. And you see this problem on a daily basis just because, let me just explain to you for a second that we get a license fee which covers the 66% of our revenues, roughly. And we also get advertising inside the same house, and it's roughly the 25% of our revenues. And this is going to create, you know, debates and criticism inside the house and outside the house all the time. What I see as a chance there is that we're going through the process of the renewal of the concession, and it's going to take place in the next few months. And there's a chance there, it's not given, but there's a chance that maybe that could be the occasion of rediscussing altogether how it works and how these two different sources of revenues will behave. Because if not, we're condemned to go on a daily basis getting attacks from newspapers and everybody that tries to get a little part of the fee or a little part of the advertising just to, you know, readjust the market.
Now, you've just had a change in your license fee collection model. You used to have a license fee like the BBC, and I think you said the evasion rates were over 25%.
Even more. It was around 27%,
okay,
which was totally unacceptable. So at the end of the day, we had this decision to connect our collection of the fee with the electric bill, and it's just happening. So we will know just next month which is the result, which is the outcome, but very likely and hopefully the evasion is going to be really dramatically lower, and this is going to create us more opportunities in terms of revenues.
So you moved from a license fee now to a bill which is charged alongside your electricity bill.
Exactly, but despite this, I must tell you that it's just half of this, it's good news, because the fee has been reduced last year from 113 euros, which was low if compared to most of the fees around Europe, to 100. And someone is promising that it's going to be even more reduced, which is going to create problems out there.
But I think you said that you'd raise an extra how much? In terms of the new mechanism?
Basically, if the new mechanism works, and let's keep finger crossed, it's next month, and if it works, it's going to be something like 400 million more, but with the government, there has been an agreement that half of this will remain inside the market, and it's going to the local television stations and other kind of destinations. So basically, we will get, if in the best option there, we will get like 200 million more.
Okay. James, I mean, you've just renewed the charter, a new license fee deal, but doesn't that sound like a great replacement for the license fee? Household tax or?
Well, the government did look at a household tax. John Whittingdale was in favour when he was chair of the select committee. We were open to it, actually. I mean, there are clearly advantages. It's simpler. It does raise more money. There are quite big risks as well. Particularly the version in the UK was that it would be raised as sort of a universal tax. That brings you closer to government, closer to the Treasury. I think we feel already uncomfortably close to Whitehall in some ways. It's one of the things since I worked at the BBC in the 90s, the more noticeable things is we feel much more embroiled now in government accounts, the NAO, a whole range of Whitehall. You know, and sometimes people in government talk about, like other government departments, before correcting themselves. So I think there's a danger that the household fee takes you down that route. The electricity one's an interesting idea. I think we would always worry about not being in charge of our collection. You know, it used to be collected by the Home Office. Since we've taken over collection of the license fee, we've halved the costs overall. It's much lower than in Italy. So, you know, if it reduced evasion, then we would look at it. But I think we feel we've got a pretty good system at the moment. And one of the very good things that was happening in Charter was closing the iPlayer loophole. So if people consume on demand only, they do have to pay the license fee.
Now, you raised the issue of independence, and whilst it's not a financial mechanism, I mean, in terms of the BBC's business model, your independence is sort of everything. Isn't there a sense that with the over 75 concession and now with the concession on talent pay, that actually you've given up a big chunk of that independence?
No, not at all. I mean, we fought hard for that. We've managed to persuade the government to change their proposals on the board, for example. So there'll now be same number of NEDs nominated by the nominations committee and through a public appointments process. So that was a good thing. I think, the over 75s, the key thing is we're in charge of the policy. So you can think about it just as the concession that the National Theatre or Royal Opera House would have. It's something where, yes, there is there's some free licenses, but it's something that's controlled by the BBC after 2020.
Would you consider taking them away after 2020?
2020 is a very long way away.
Would you consider taking them away?
As I say, 2020 is a long time from here. And one of the things you're taught in media training is not to answer hypothetical questions.
That was a real question.
So it's a real question in 2020.
Okay.
Put it that way. The 150, the disclosure of transparency pay, we don't support. We don't think that's right, and I think we'd particularly worry if there was an unfair playing field between ourselves and indies, where indies were able to not disclose people's pay and we had to disclose it. I think that would be a real blow for the studios.
Okay, Peter, can you explain to us, again, take a couple of minutes to explain DR and also the challenges you're facing to your model?
Sure. I come from a small country. We have 5 million people speaking Danish. And I think there are two reasons why you should still keep an eye on our country, because competition is just extreme right now. One is that the digital infrastructure has historically been very well functioning in Denmark. That's one part. And the other part is that going all the way back in history, we are a flat country without any natural resources whatsoever. We have nothing. So we have always been a people of... No, we have always been people of traders, Vikings, some would say. But anyways, we have always been very much oriented towards the world and have always consumed the world and new ideas. So foreign content is considered of very high value to us. Given that and the digital well-functioning infrastructure just makes the competition massive, and it's really accelerating. And it really puts pressure on us, all broadcasters actually, even though how well we are doing. We have problems with younger skewing audiences and so on that especially.
And in the world of drama, many of the people here from the UK will know Denmark for its dramas, Borgen, Killin, The Bridge. In the world of international co-production and finance drama, how do you fare in that world?
Well, I think it feels like we are in the World Cup every single day. Before it was just Danish competition, it was pretty good. But we are doing very good on the drama side, and that is the strategy or philosophy, I guess it is quite clear. It's about being extremely local to become global. So we don't really try to make drama to attract co-production money. We do drama because we think it's the right way to do it, and it makes it very, very distinct. And I think it's a distinctiveness that makes it very popular where we are. And for instance, you mentioned The Bridge has been shown in 170 countries, which is quite a lot for a small language area. So, yeah.
Okay. I know it was mentioned earlier by Jane Millichip that she felt that sort of the bubble in drama pricing was a bit like the subprime mortgage. The whole thing was going to collapse. I mean, do any of you believe that you can continue, that the continual price ramp in drama is something that you can afford? I know the BBC has pulled out of certain sports rights and other things in order to prioritise drama.
Yeah, and some of the changes we made to BBC Three were to preserve the drama budget. Having said that, we have been as an industry able to manage lots of those cost increases through better use of co-pro. Worldwide does a brilliant job in terms of generating return from IP. We are still producing huge amounts of drama in this country, partly because of the model. I think for the cost of House of Cards, we did, for 2 series, we did 14 different dramas. So actually the model is not bust. You know, there are pressures to manage. You can do an awful lot to manage that in terms of commercial income. You may have to take some tough choices within the portfolio within that, but you know, we are making 14,000 hours every year. The model is still working very well.
Anybody feel any pressure on drama in terms of making dramas that fit? I know when I was running in-house, good hair and teeth was always a criterion. No regional accents was something that came up when you got into co-production discussions. Anybody else feeling those pressures?
I think the opposite, actually. I think one of the most exciting things that happened in the past 5 years is you're not having conversations, particularly with people across the Atlantic, that take that form. And actually, you only have to go to the screening to see the number of British actors who are popping up in prominent roles. But you know, look at an example like Humans, which AMC co-produced with us, predominantly British cast, shot in Britain, did extraordinarily well for us, massive, you know, record breaker for us, but also did incredibly well for AMC. So I don't want to sound Pollyanna-ish about it, but I see millions of pounds from OTT platforms, from Netflix coming into Channel 4 dramas in a way that we wouldn't have had years ago. And simply put, that means I've now got shows on my digital channels which have got the production values I could have only hoped for years ago on the main channel. So I think there's a massive amount of money coming into content, and you know, one way I sort of think of it is we can monetize the taste palette that Channel 4's developed over a number of years. So I think that it is challenging on price, but I also feel very optimistic about where we've got to.
What about non-English language?
You know, I totally agree with Jay, because I do think this is a great opportunity, even for non-English languages. There are many productions taking place now in Italy. Tetranos, before just mentioned Subura, but there are many others. Next month we're going to be out with Medici, which will be a big global co-production. This is a great opportunity even for our public systems, because it gives us the chance to keep this ecosystem vital, and at the same time be able to play on a global, not just a market, but on a global cultural scale. And that's part of the debate. I think it's part of the debate. Where do you place yourself in terms of cultural positioning globally? And this is a very European debate. I do understand it perfectly, but I do believe in it. And I do think that public services can be very important in this. You become global, but at the same time, you keep your distinctiveness there. And again, if I may add, even in the digital market, this becomes more and more important, because it's obvious that you're not gonna have the same things that you used to be. And us, as the Italian public system, we had an incredible delay in getting into the digital area. And this kind of production are helping us connecting with younger audience that we kind of lose in the last 10 years.
Okay. Now, one of those slides that I cannibalized as I was trying to explain it, it's quite clear that there is a squeeze on PSB income, certainly for the BBC. Channel 4, recent uptick, but everybody's talking about post-Brexit depression, and RAI and DR, you're talking about license fees which are under review and potentially under pressure. So, but we're also in a time where producers have more rights, and that came to a head most recently here with Bake Off. James, are we now into an era where the BBC just can't compete for those big shows?
No, I don't think that's true at all. I mean, you saw the graph in terms of our income. Yes, it's flat cash for the foreseeable future, but that's not a bad outcome at all compared to what was happening in public spending, what was threatened at the start of the process. And, you know, we've got £4 billion plus to play with. So I don't think it's in any way a world in which we can't compete for those rights. Clearly, you know, this has been debated already today, Bake Off, so I don't want to rake over the individual details of that decision. I think from a PSB point of view, I think the one question it does raise is we now see a real chasm between the way that we're going to be regulated, where if people go and look at the Charter and Agreement, there's an incredibly detailed set of guidance to Ofcom about the children's programs. We should do history programs, religion, current affairs. It presumes they should keep the 100+ quotas we already have, and that they should be increased, detailed stuff on music and playlists. We wouldn't wish that on Channel 4, but I think looking at what's happened over Bake Off, it does make us think that there's a huge difference between the way we're both regulated. I think we feel that Channel 4 should clearly be less regulated because you're not taking public money, but I think there's now a question to look at about whether the balance is right. And you know, I think something where there's some rethinking of what's the Charter and Agreement, and that is deregulated to a certain extent. We're trusted to create a more distinctive BBC, and then the regulation only comes in if we fail to live up to our obligations. And then a similar thing for Channel 4, but lighter touch is something that should should be looked at now.
How do you feel about that, Joe?
I think it's a slightly amazing thing to say. I mean, in the end, you made the point, James, and we don't take a penny of public money, not one penny. So, and I also think I have a slight
You are a
advantage.
public service
Yeah,
broadcaster.
but I have a slight advantage here, having sat here on BBC One, controlling £1 billion of public money and sitting in an identical role at Channel 4.
But do you think you shouldn't have any regulation at all, which is what
let
you
me just finish,
effectively
James.
have?
No, let me just finish. I can tell you what it feels like to sit at Channel 4, where we're measured by 42 different metrics. We have our SMCP tracker coming in every single quarter. We have quantitative measures through Ofcom. And I can also tell you, which is a slight advantage I have in this one, of what it's like sitting on BBC One and what that felt like. And I totally understand that there are requirements of the BBC. You would expect that transaction when billions of pounds of public money is handed over. That hasn't happened with Channel 4. So I'd also just raise one similar point. I understand that you feel aggrieved about Bake Off, although it's just worth remembering the BBC lost Bake Off. Channel 4 didn't take Bake Off. I think it's just important to have that out there. But did you have a similar reaction on public policy when ITV took The Voice? Because I don't think you did.
Look, I think the audience have made extremely clear they're really saddened by the fact that they've not going to have something that they absolutely love. You'll have your own take on it, but I think something really, really precious will be lost. But you are a public service broadcaster. You only have that resource from being a public service broadcaster, the right to raise £1 billion. Of course, you should be regulated.
We are
And what I'm
regulated,
saying is that
James.
you're not sufficiently regulated.
Okay.
That what this raises is a debate about essentially whether Channel 4 can sort of do what it wants. And I think given the amount of regulation that we're seeing in the Charter Agreement, there should now be a look to see whether the balance between the two is right or not.
No, I understood what you said. I would simply make the point that I think
You
in
just didn't answer
exchange...
it.
No, I did answer it. In
You didn't.
exchange...
You're just saying essentially we don't take any public money, we shouldn't have any regulation.
No,
essentially.
James, I think I'm slightly surprised by you with a policy background thinking Channel 4 doesn't have any regulation. The regulation at Channel 4 is extremely clear
You have
and
extremely
very
light
stringent.
content. You have
Okay,
extremely light content regulation.
that is your view. That is quite simply
think
not
it's
the
quite
case.
clear.
Well, James, in the nicest possible way, you haven't done either of these jobs, so I can tell you what it feels like to sit in both of these jobs. And in the nicest possible way, I understand what that
In the
feels
nicest
like.
possible way, I was Secretary of State for Culture, and I did help set up Ofcom, so I know how the regulatory system works.
I'm sure you do, but I'm telling you from the coalface what this feels like, and I can tell you it is a total and I assume deliberate misrepresentation of the situation that Channel 4 is not regulated. I understand.
I didn't say not regulated. I said that you are too lightly regulated, given what you've
I
just
did
done.
hear what you said. I understand that. My view is that's not the case, and I asked you a question, which I think you've also not answered, which is, did you have a similar view when you lost a big franchise to ITV?
Look, I think there's a difference between it going to ITV, who are operating entirely commercially. Clearly, they have some public service obligations, but very different from Channel 4. You have a remit which you describe yourself as born risky. I think there's real questions about whether buying Bake Off qualifies for that. And I think by doing that, unfortunately, for all of us who love and support Channel 4 and it being in the public sector, you have given ammunition to the people who want to privatise it. So
Well, okay.
I think both in terms of the regulation and in terms of what you have done to reopen an argument, which I felt was very much closing, I think there are questions about whether this was the right thing for you to do, either corporately or for your audience.
I understand that, and you made your position very clear, but let me just put it a slightly different way. And I explained earlier, we don't take a penny of public money. Channel 4 has existed from the very beginning by supporting independent producers and by operating a very effective cross-subsidy model. Yeah. Bake Off will be part of that strategy, and it is part of that strategy. So I'm genuinely saddened to hear you take the approach that you've done, but I am very confident about where we are in terms of what we deliver in terms of public impact, which I think is very considerable. Our sustainability is not in question, and I certainly can tell you, sitting at the coalface, it does not on any level feel like a light level of regulation.
Okay.
I mean, just say, this is all said from a love of Channel 4 and wanting to see that argument for you continuing to stay in the public sector be supported. And for well, I mean, you were the one who took Bake Off, so you should be prepared to. You should be prepared to live with the consequences of that decision.
James, just one thing I think is important to get in the room. I understand how painful it is to lose franchises, but let's be utterly clear. This is an independent producer who, after 3 years of an increasingly dysfunctional relationship, decided they would no longer make the show for you.
Sure.
This was widely leaked. At that point, that franchise was in the market. Now, I appreciate that's very painful, and if I was sitting at the BBC, I would be thinking quite long and hard about how that situation had arisen. But that is what happened. That is what happened.
Sharon White in the room? Mate. Okay. In terms of competition, may have screwed up the numbers, but I'm back on. In Denmark, you talk about a hyper-competitive market now. You're also in a situation where more of your content has to be made by independent producers. Do you see yourselves facing these sorts of issues? I mean, are you in competition now for formats and franchises?
I think this is more fierce. I like it. But
This is love. This is a very British
yeah.
form of love.
I mean, it started with sports rights eventually. That has just exploded in price.
Do you have any top-level sport on DR?
We just showed the Olympics and the Paralympics, of course, the World Cups and so on, which are less commercially attractive. But the national team in football, we cannot show that any longer. It's simply gone to a level where we cannot defend it, even though it's important for us to gather people, and we call it a segment killer. You know, everybody's watching it. We had to somehow take that money and turn it into, for instance, drama or big entertainment, such as, and not to bring it up again, but a Danish version of the Bake Off.
Have you done a deal with Discovery for the Olympics? Do you have the Olympics going forward?
Do I have to comment on that?
No, you don't?
No, we don't have a deal with them
At the
so far.
moment?
No.
What about Rai?
There's a discussion. I'm not commenting exactly on this because this is a very, by the way, I'm just picking up on what Peter was saying, because sports rights, it's a very key issue right now, even for public services, because we cannot afford them anymore most of the time, and it's true that it's something that keeps you very much close to your audience. And so that's a very big discussion throughout all Europe, because we have to understand where we can place ourselves in the situation in which we cannot afford them anymore.
James, can you see a day with big sports rights back on the BBC beyond the big events? Live football?
I think we're 50% of the hours of consumption of sport in the UK, despite having 3% of the hours, something like that. We've brought the FA Cup back to the BBC. It's working incredibly well, so we're really proud of it. We've renewed Wimbledon. You know, we're very proud of our live sport. Clearly, that is one area where we have to make some tough choices. We've had to do that with the Open Golf, but we'll absolutely continue to have a major presence in live sport. And actually, it's one of the things that rights holders want, because it gets them that exposure. And you know, most rights holders are getting that combination of subscription and free-to-air to get both the popularity but also the income.
And Jay, Formula One done a good job for you.
It's done a fantastic job, and I'm really proud of the fact we've now got a substantial sports slate. You know, off the back of 700 hours of live coverage of the Paralympics, to have Formula One move across as seamlessly as it did and to deliver really good young share for us is really important. And I think it's fantastic that Channel 4 can be in that market.
Okay, last question from me, and then we're going to come out to the floor. One of the questions which come up a number of sessions is prominence. In the world we're moving into, the on-demand world, the IPTV world, you have prominence now, but should you have prominence in this new world? I mean, just by fact that you're a PSB. Start with you, James.
Yes, I think it's worked really well. Being at the top of the EPGs worked well for all the public service broadcasters. I think for us it's a good quid pro quo with not charging fees. I think what comes from that is the ability for people to find that content. I think as we move into an on-demand world, that should now be extended to things like the public sector service broadcaster players. I think that'd be a sensible thing to do, but also to give Ofcom some wider powers to make sure that audiences can find that PSB content, because it's what they want. You know, when you go and survey people, 7 out of 10 people say they think they should see the BBC channels at the top of the EPG. We need the same in an on-demand world, because that's increasingly where consumption is going.
Monica, in Italy, your regulator, I think, has said that the must-carry rules must be completed with must-be-found rules.
It's an attempt to say that prominence is important for a public system because, again, as James just said, it's important that people can find you somewhere, because you're carrying some values and some contents that they have to be in touch with. And it depends on your level of accountability, it depends on the quality of what you do, but then it depends on your own existence. So if we think that this incredible European phenomena, which is a public service broadcast, has to survive, you have to decide how it can survive, because it's true and obvious that we're going to such a complex and diverse world, and being able to find that content is...
David Attenborough would say, if it survival is about adaptability and
Yeah,
being the
I totally
fittest.
agree. I totally agree with the adaptability, but in the sense that we are investing very much in innovation and being able to connect with younger audiences and be where they are, because it's exactly what I didn't do in the last 10 years. So we're investing that much in all portable devices, and we did that incredible experiment during the European football games, where the football match of Italy and Sweden has been seen by 1 million people in streaming at the same time. And so the devices became the TV at the same time. And that's what public service broadcast has to do, connecting with people and being able to be where they are to give that kind of content and that kind of values and that kind of distinctiveness that cannot be done by anybody else, which doesn't mean being against the market. I'm totally in favor of the market, of co-production, of being in constant dialogue with the rest of the market, but being able to preserve our values and our reason of existence.
Okay, Peter?
I strongly agree. It would have been nice if you stayed in the EU. That would have made it, I think, easier to solve this. But that put aside, net neutrality, and yeah, would be nice in that sense because, yeah, some might put us lower or giving us lower speed and so on. That would be, if the market takes over here, we are very much in trouble.
Jay?
Yeah, I agree with James, in the spirit of love.
Good, it's all good in the end. Okay, we're going to come out to the floor for questions. Can I ask if you've got a question that you raise your hand and say who you are and where you're from? So question there and then question here. Can you stand? Sorry, so we can see.
I can, sorry.
I know, you've got your laptop and everything.
Hi, Chris Curtis from Broadcast. At the risk of instigating round two, I'm going to ask a question about Bake Off. What I'd like to know, away from the rights and the wrongs about whether Channel 4 should have taken Bake Off, I think it's interesting to ask whether its transfer from one PSB to another points to any changes in the relationships between independent producers and PSBs, in the way in which PSBs nurture shows, but also in the way in which they reward success, in the sense of things being recommissioned very regularly, perhaps at the same tariff or perhaps even a reduced tariff. I wonder if James and Jay could speak to that.
I might be being a bit stupid because I don't entirely understand. I mean, what do I think it shows? In a sense, it shows exactly what the system was set up to achieve, which is the IP sits with the producer creates a show, the broadcaster hosts and works in strong collaboration with that producer to develop a hit, but in the end, the IP sits with the producer, and it's one of the reasons that the way we've fundamentally changed the way that we work at 4 to talk about it as a creative partnership, and I think it is a creative partnership, and one of the things I'm proudest of in the entire situation, at the risk of James hitting me, is that Love chose to come to Channel 4, which wasn't the biggest offer, because they wanted the best creative partner, and they decided that that was us. So I don't think it changes the fundamentals. I think it's a reminder of the status quo, which is the IP rests with the indies.
James?
I mean, I think it shows the importance of studios for us. You know, that clearly that's not going to be in any way the majority of our approach to things like television commissioning. But if we can't have the ability to develop our own IP and to be able to both have an in-house provider and very strong independent providers, then I think we'll be in a position where in 10 years' time you'll have a significantly weakened BBC. So, you know, I think there was some questions over the last couple of years about why we were pushing studios so hard. I think maybe something we can agree about is it shows the importance of the BBC having a strong in-house production base to have the best of both worlds, both in-house IP, but also fantastic IP from independent producers.
Okay, question there.
Yeah, David Bond from the Financial Times. Question for James. You clearly made your feelings known there about a stronger regulation for Channel 4. Be interested to know what your view is on privatisation. Do you think Channel 4 should be privatised?
No.
Can you expand?
Look, we believe very strongly in the competition for quality and the mixed ecosystem of the British public service broadcasting environment. I think people say that's one of the examples that works best in Europe. Actually, the fact that we're not competing for the same income stream is a really good feature of the current regulatory setup in this country, and we think Channel 4 has a fantastic role to play in that. That born risky role is something of innovating, is something which has always kept the BBC on its toes and delivered fantastic value to audiences and cultural change in this country. So we're entirely in favour of that, and will continue to be so.
Hi, Krishna Arora from SBS in Australia, and I'm slightly familiar as well with the Danish and the Italian systems, and I wanted to talk a little bit, or ask a question really, about the move to full independent production that the BBC has brought about by putting everything out to tender, or agreeing that over the life of the charter it'll be 100% out to tender. Which is something that in any other year I think would have been the biggest story in the production business, and because of what's happened this year, I'm not sure it is. But I'd just like to hear from the Italian and the Danish panelists whether they could imagine that sort of thing happening in their countries, with their public broadcasters not having in-house production and only commissioning independents.
If you want me to react on this, as I told before, we're going through very deep changes. It's not happening now. I do think that it's a chance in the future. I don't think that we have to produce inside for any kind of reason. I mean, we can easily go in that direction, but I do think that the next few months are going to be key for our decision out there.
Okay, Peter?
It's definitely possible. I think the system we have now, with a very large in-house production facility, makes prices actually lower, and it's more efficient, and we're closer to the production company. So it has some kind of good things to it. The last 20%, which is produced in the private sector, does something else to us, and is equally important. Where the tipping point is difficult to say, but eventually, of course, it will probably slip against the private sector.
Okay, there's a question there. Is there any other questions? And then there's one at the back. Okay. Yes,
Jane Martinson. I'm sure you won't be surprised I'm going back to Bake Off. Can I ask both James and Jay? James, are you saying that publicly owned broadcasters should not be allowed to compete for hit shows? And that includes the BBC as well as Channel 4. And Jay, given that the BBC has already said it could launch a rival programme with Mary Mellon Sue, and that Sharon White this morning said distinctiveness would not mean her saying that a similar show is wrong, how can you justify that amount of money? And how do you argue against those people that say, has Channel 4 spent that money on a tent?
No, we're not saying that. What I'm saying is that there's now a chasm between the way that we're regulated on content. We would clearly like deregulation from where the Charter Agreement is in draft, and we think there's a question about whether this suggests that there should be some tightening up of how Channel 4 is regulated in content terms, but not to the level that we are.
So there's a question at the back, and then last question down here.
Do you want me to? Yeah.
Sorry, Jay.
I think the tent gag's a great gag, and all the journalists have had great fun with it. But the honest fact is, and in fact, Peter and I were talking earlier about the fact this is a show big hit in Denmark for him. This is a show that is sold to 24 countries, that is a returning franchise in multiple territories, that has been hugely successful. And the other thing I find quite funny in this is the notion that we would have gone out and offered on a show like this without having run the numbers really extensively. This had to go to the board for approval in a completely transparent way, and it was evaluated by a series of different measures. So in the end, we don't make decisions that don't pay their way on an offer like this. So we were very, very clear what we were buying. We were very clear about the advantage to Channel 4 of having another key plank that would support our cross-subsidy model, just off the back of things like the Paralympics, which are huge loss leaders for us, but a very important part of our remit delivery. So, as I say, it goes back to a long and noble tradition of Channel 4 working in this way, and I'm confident we bought a hugely successful global format. I'm delighted Paul Hollywood's come with it. We have a long and noble tradition, again, of reinventing formats and of thinking again around casting, and I feel very excited by the possibility of being on the channel.
Okay, there's a question at the back, and then Claire.
Patrick Foster from The Telegraph. Just if I could ask Jay and James to argue some more before our copy deadlines. James, is it true that you are thinking of launching a baking show with the remaining talent? And Jay, if he says yes, which he probably will say, do you think that is something distinctive that the BBC should be doing, ripping off a format that's already stolen?
I think there's been a lot of speculation in the press, and the last thing that we would do is give advance notice of it to one of our greatest partners.
I'm feeling the love. Jay?
What am I answering, Patrick? What do you want to know? Am I concerned that they would launch a baking show? I mean, you know, the BBC will do what the BBC wants to do. I think the history with Love is well known. I have bought a format which I'm very, very comfortable about. We have got, you know, one of the stars of that format coming across to Channel 4, and I'm confident will launch well when it comes to us. So, you know, the BBC will do what the BBC wants to do.
Final question.
This is not a question for Jay and James. This is a question for the other PSBs on the panel. How do you avoid a centrifugal force around the metropolitan producers in your countries? How do you spread the talent and grow new talent in a big and small country?
Peter?
Yeah. For instance, for drama, we have sort of dogma rules that we never do more than 3 or 4 seasons. Simply of that matter that we don't change the main writer. If he or she runs dry, we close the show. And it's just telling all the writers, don't look out, look in. And it's just another way of looking at creativity and always getting new talent in. And every time we have a success, they go to the United States and so on. So it's a very natural ecosystem where new talent is always new. If you go to the drama department, you can say hi to new people every single day, basically. So yeah, there's a lot of change there.
Monica?
You touch a very sensitive point because all of a sudden we realized that we were discussing always with the same creatives and the same productions, and we decided to work quite a lot with local and regional people around the country. And also we just recently opened up a website in which you can, you know, post ideas and get in touch with us so that it can be a more transparent and open system to get to the point where we start a production with someone.
Okay, and with that, we have to wrap this session. I want to close by thanking my panel, James, Jay, Monica, and Peter. I want to apologise to Enders Analysis for butchering their slides at the beginning. The analysis is all good. And after a short coffee break, can you come back to hear the new Minister of State for Digital and Culture, Mr. Matt Hancock? Thank you.